So this video is going to be a little different than the videos I've made so far, in the sense that a lot of the videos I've made are things that I have learned about throughout the years, and I'm finding that this is important background information for me to share in establishing what I talk about in this channel. Um, Today, I have something that I'm processing that is very relevant to this channel, so I thought I would give this a try. This will be a little different than the videos I've made thus far in the sense that I am jumping right into my politics, my perspective, my worldview without providing all of the context yet. I'll provide that as much as I can as we go, and then I'll have to fill in later the things I haven't talked about yet. But I thought it was beneficial, one, um, to share my perspective with you, just like on my process, like for you to see like what my process looks like in practice, of like me processing out loud. And two, I think the actual thing itself is very relevant and will be um, good to talk about. Um, so the thing I am making a video about that I am here to process is the Pride event, which I went to, and I was working. I was working officially in my capacity as a therapist, and that's relevant, I think, for later. I was working officially in my capacity as a therapist to help with de-escalation at the Philadelphia Pride, in case anything happened. And part of why I was there to do this is because the new organization that was running it wanted police to not be there. And so the solution that was brought in was to have therapists and other professionals be there instead. So I know there's some controversy about like the group who took it over. I tend to think it's like white backlash against like predominantly people of color led coalition that's like doing most of the organizing. I did talk to some white people during the event who expressed that to me directly. I don't know the specifics of what had led up to this and um, like what the situation was as they were taking over. I don't know all the background info on that. But what I can speak to is my experience while I was there. Um, so it was important for me to be there. Something which I've yet to talk about, but which we'll, I'm sure, talk about at length, is that I am a proponent of police and prison abolition because I believe that punitary or punishment-based measures do not solve the problems that they are reacting to. They tend to make the problems worse in pretty much any case you can think of. So this is why I oppose police as an institution and prisons as an institution. And there's much, much more to that, but that's a sort of overview and leading up to this, why it was important for me to be there. And so I've been thinking and researching and reading a lot about what it looks like to show up in a healing way, socially, structurally, institutionally, and individually, when police are not part of that. Like how to show up and not be police. Not just in a literal way of not acting as, or not like being employed by police, but also in less of a literal way in terms of like what we're thinking and how we're building relationships with people. And I'll share with you some of the books that I've been reading. These are the two that have been most influential for me. One is Beyond Survival, which is a collection of writings on transformative justice. And I'll provide a link to that in the bio, and the other is We Do This Till We Free Us, which is a collection of writings, but it's by one particular author who has been a very important like figure amongst abolitionists in terms of like inspiring a lot of us, as she's a bit of a like movement elder, you could say. So, um, so that's the background. Um, and I'm not saying this as a slight on the group that organized it. I think it takes practice and time to work these things out. And so this is me processing and not putting judgment on them. Um, but the situation was that there was a lack of communication and coordination up until like the absolute last minute. There were like balls that got dropped. And particularly, I'm thinking of how I didn't know who I was going to be working with until like I showed up. And I think it's very imperative in the work of police abolition and transformative justice, which is like what would be in its place, is various forms of transformative justice practice. Um, it all depends on relationships and community, like actual felt community, not community as shared characteristics. Because I showed up. I was like stationed in and around this like bar area, and I showed up there, and I had a shirt on that told people I was a volunteer, but not that I was there for de-escalation. And again, I'm not blaming um, the organization for this. They were actually quite responsive when I shared these reflections after the fact. So again, this is my experience processing externally, not policing. Okay. Um, I was there and I had a shirt that said I was a volunteer, but that did not say that I was there for de-escalation counseling. No one knew who I was, so I like introduced myself to the bartenders and the security as they came in, and I tried to mingle and like talk with people, but people didn't know why I was there. Um, there were a few times people came up to me, and it was like I usually got one of two interactions. One is, hey, what are you doing here? And so I would share. Or, can you help me with these directions? And I would help. But I think because I was a volunteer, there was like no knowledge of what I was doing there. And people think, oh, this person's there for like general logistical support. That's reasonable. Or someone else is like, I wonder what this person is here for. And the whole point of me being there is people, I guess, like knowing why I'm there and being able to turn to me for support when they need it. Because there was a situation where people didn't know why I was there. I was alert and moving constantly and just like scanning the crowd for any sorts of like danger for 7 hours straight. And I am still feeling the physical effects like days later. Um, so that is how police are reproduced. Is that lack of preparation? And again, I'm not blaming the group, um, but because the way that police operate is in this exact same way of scanning for threats and viewing everything as a threat, and that's why I think so much of police violence is normalized within the police department because they have this us versus them mentality and they're constantly on threat, and so they're constantly responding as if everything is a threat. Um, so, like from like a mental health perspective, their fight or flight is always activated, and in order to resolve situations, it's very rare actually that you need to activate your fight or flight. If there had been a situation where I knew all of the people who I was going to be working with, and they were comfortable with me, and there had been some amount of education and understanding and expectation of like, hey, you can find these people around, they're skilled in helping with any conflict, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, they can also connect you with resources. Um, this is what they're going to look like. If people knew that that was a thing, then I could have relaxed and anticipated that people will come to me or someone else will refer a situation to me. Um, because people are already anticipating how I can support them. So I think of like transformative justice, like we're really at like an education stage in terms of like a broader system scale of like needing people to know what to expect and what transformative justice can even look like because people don't know. And the very few times where resources are starting to pop up that are transformative, a lot of the time people don't know about them. So um, I also studied advertising in my undergrad. So this is also how I think about like political issues as well as like how are people conceptualizing them on a mass scale. And part of that is advertising. So there being a need to advertise what transformative justice is and what people can expect from a transformative justice practitioner. So yeah, like I said, I talked with the organization. They seemed responsive. I don't really know what's going on with their process. So this is like a story that is ongoing and which I don't know where it goes yet. Um, I am currently not sure what my continued involvement will look like. I guess that we'll have to see. Um, but yeah, this is very like process and like I have no problem with where we're at right now. Like nothing happened. That's the other key thing is like there was really no issues because like conflict is very unlikely to arise like unless like there's some other issue like police tend to create issues. Um, People were just friendly with each other. People were flirting. There was a few times where people were like mildly upset with each other, like someone spilled a drink on someone else and they were pretty upset, but like I knew and they knew they weren't going to escalate because they don't get anything out of that. Um, and here's the other thing is like I was there the first half of the day. I think if I was there the second half of the day, I might have been needed more because people would have had more time to drink alcohol. Um, yeah, I think like alcohol in queer spaces is like a whole other issue, which I'm not going to get into today, but um, it bears discussing. Um, yeah, I was sober the whole time. Um, I and I mentioned that because that's like as someone who's there to support people, it's helpful to be sober. Um, Not everyone needs to be sober at all times in all like organizing roles. Speaking of like roles, though, I think the other you can tell I didn't make an outline. This is a little bit more fluid than my other videos, I'll say. Um, the other thing with role is that I was there as a therapist, and that for me is like really important because ideally that's not a role for professionals to fulfill. And I say that knowing that to an extent, my professional like skills and like degree process has like helped me to get these skills. But I think that doing these things for a job and doing these things as like being like embedded in a community are two like entirely separate things. And um, I think the payment, like the fact that I'm getting paid for this work, the fact that they're offering payment, I think it does change like the nature of the relationship. Like not to say that like people who are working in jobs can't be a part of communities, but that um, the professionalism like aspect of things just like introduces a level of like capitalism into the interaction that like ideally would not be there. Like ideally this is a role played by like a community member that people know and trust and like these people who exist in these roles tend to pick up conflict resolution skills um, in a much more natural, organic, and sustainable way than a lot of therapists do. So yeah, I also like just don't super trust therapists to like know what to do in these situations because like I don't think it's common to do the sort of like work I have on like conceptualizing abolition and like thinking about how I would put that into practice. Like there would need to be a process of people learning and wanting to do this, but that process needs to be connected to community. So that's why like the professional roles aspect of it is like something I don't feel great about. I don't have an answer in terms of like, you know, I know it seems more feasible. And so like how do we get there to that other option? Because So I think, maybe we can start here and see where things go. Um, the other piece I wanted to check in, which is a bit of a change in subject, is the coronavirus COVID piece of things. Um, so this was really important for me to do, as I've been speaking about in terms of abolition. At the same time, I knew I was taking a big risk because I'm still in the camp where I am regularly watching COVID numbers. I am very cautious around being in public spaces because I know there is still a tremendous risk, not just to my health, but in the capacity for me to inadvertently spread it around and just like exponentially increase the amount of people who have negative effects of COVID because of my like desire to be out. Um, so this is something I'm very mindful of, and I have a whole host of feelings to unpack about coronavirus and the government's response and capitalism's response more generally. Um, but in this moment, what I'll say is um, I feel very uneasy with the norm of people. There's part of it where it's being uninformed, and there's a part of it of like also not wanting to be informed. And then also there's a part of it of like my life doesn't matter and other people's lives don't matter. I think all of these parts are playing a role, and I think it can be hard to like face up to those things. And if you're someone who's going out, like I have full empathy for you. Like it really sucks to like be stuck inside, not knowing when the situation is going to get better, and wanting to connect with friends, like being so disconnected from community. Like I get it. Like I'm not imposing judgment or blame on people because, like I've said, I've gone out as well, just usually with a mask. But yeah, I think that is the piece of like not wearing masks. Because I understand people wanting to leave the house, but not wearing masks. Um, there was a vanishingly small number of other people in the crowd who were wearing masks, and I was like surrounded by like a packed crowd in all directions for the entire time I was there. So, like, just have very mixed feelings about like being. No, I don't have mixed feelings. I'm upset. I'm upset because I was exposed to probably like in the 4 or 5 digits of people in those 7 hours who are within like a close distance of me because I was moving the whole time as well. Um, and the incredibly high probability that I had to stop and restart because my computer ran out of space. I'm back. The incredibly high probability that I did have a very close contact with COVID, and just sort of having to accept like I think it's very likely I might catch it as a result of like being at this Pride event and like being in this role. Um, and I'm feeling like quite upset about that. Like it really didn't have to be this way in the sense that if everyone had just worn masks, it would have been so much safer. And to say nothing of like gathering in such large numbers, which is also like I'll say questionable, of questionable safety, of questionable wisdom. Um, but even just adding masks because no one was really wearing. There was like me and like a couple other people all day. Um, and I think this is concerning to me, not just like within society, but also specifically like within a queer space. Like just the lack of like connection to like what our actions might result in for like people who we're connected to. Um, and I'm not blaming people who are watching this video who may have gone out and not been wearing masks. Um, because I think there is this like great social pressure to be in denial about the severity of the situation. This pressure is coming from the top. It's coming from government messaging. It's coming from the CEOs and the business owners of big corporations. They don't want us to think that COVID is still an issue because that would slow their profits. Um, it's literally like a decision they made, which is to say, like, I'd rather my workers be dead than for me to pay for them to be safe. That's how they view things. You are a number to them. And like my decision making is guided by like they're not going to care about me if I, you know, am disabled long term. Like disabled people have been saying like um, care is really hard to access and like COVID is extremely likely to be a mass disabling event, as we're already seeing with instances of long COVID. Um, if you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I will provide a link. Um, Please familiarize yourself with the possible long term ramifications of your actions. I wouldn't pressure you to make a decision one way or the other, but please be informed about the consequences of your decisions because um, I think, being in a society, in a place where we both worship death and are afraid to talk about death in a real meaningful way, all we can do is rush towards death. There's no way of talking about how we can live a fulfilling life if we don't talk about the ways that we are dying. So I think like socially we need to have a very important conversation. So it's like this video, two main things. One is some reflections on a transformative justice process, which is in its very infancy stages and like hopes for the future with it. And the other piece is like a tremendous amount of frustration with the current COVID situation and at all levels. Because I think it's like frustrating and hurtful to see people I care about um, go out and like risk their safety and the safety of people around them. And it's also frustrating to see um, entire communities of people just like not care about each other in doing this. And it's also frustrating um, to see the way that like capitalists and the government are exploiting the situation as well. Um, so I think these two things are linked. I think usually most anything you can link those two things. Um, but yeah, I think I think maybe the way that they're linked is because transformative justice process and like building revolutionary alternative futures is how we can start to envision a new life and also like we're going to need to talk about death and grieving like along the way. Um, but yeah, it really strikes me as being important to be intentional about the way we live our life and to force the social structures around us to adapt to the right way that we want to live socially. And that part of the way we get there is through um, talking about death and feeling like our anger and our grief, and then having like broader social conversations about the life that we want to live. And obviously, I do have opinions about what that looks like, but it needs to be a process. It always needs to be a process. And I hope you have enjoyed this window into my process. Um, Let me know what you thought about, both the topic at hand, both of the two, as well as them together, as well as what it was like to see me in my process. And also, um, yeah, if you'd like to see more of what I make, please subscribe. And if you'd like to support me so I can continue to make these videos, you can follow the link in my video to my Patreon. All right, see you next time.